My wife cheated on me during my own party in front of our children. That night, my life turned upside down. Everything I thought I knew about my family, my marriage, and even my role as a father crumbled in an instant. What followed was a journey of betrayal, discovery, and rebuilding, a story I never thought would become my reality. The life I thought I had. I'm a 37-year-old man, proud of being a straightforward, hardworking person. Raised in a small Midwestern town by parents who instilled in me the values of honesty and loyalty, I thought I had built my life around those same principles. I worked hard, built a career, and married the woman I believed was my soulmate. Together, we had 3 children who were the light of my life. But 2 months ago, everything unraveled. The night that changed everything. The day had started with so much promise. I'd recently earned a promotion at work, a milestone I wanted to celebrate with those closest to me. A small, intimate gathering was all I had in mind. Family, a few close friends, some food, and good music. My wife, however, had other plans. She insisted on hosting an extravagant party, complete with elaborate decorations and catering that stretched our budget. At the time, I was flattered by her enthusiasm, thinking she wanted to make the night special for me. Little did I know, she had her own reasons for the effort. The party began at 8 p.m. The house was alive with laughter and conversation, the kind of warm atmosphere I'd always cherished. I spent the first part of the evening making rounds, thanking people for coming and soaking in the joy of the moment. It was perfect until it wasn't. While I was chatting with my father near the kitchen, I realized I hadn't seen my wife in a while. Initially, I didn't think much of it. She was probably handling some last-minute detail, I assumed. But then my 9-year-old son, pale and visibly shaken, tugged at my sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling, "something weird is happening upstairs." A chill ran through me. His tone was off, not the usual mischief or curiosity of a child his age. I followed him upstairs, where my 11-year-old daughter met us in the hallway. Her face was tear-streaked, and her words sent a shockwave through me. "Dad, it's Mom. And some man," she said, her voice breaking. My heart pounded as I pushed open the door to our bedroom. What I saw made my blood run cold. There, in the bed I had shared with my wife for over a decade, was her and another man in a compromising position. During my party, while our children were just outside the door, time seemed to stop. My son and daughter stood behind me, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. My wife didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. The man scrambled to dress and leave, but she just glared at me, her face a mix of defiance and annoyance. My children started crying, their sobs breaking the heavy silence. My mother, who had come upstairs after hearing the commotion, quickly led them away, shielding them from the chaos. My father, on the other hand, confronted the man, ordering him out of the house in no uncertain terms. And then, as if she hadn't just torn our family apart, my wife had the audacity to start yelling at me. Uncovering the betrayal after the guests had left and the house fell into an uneasy silence, I confronted her. I demanded to know how long this had been going on, why she would do such a thing, especially in front of our children. Instead of remorse, she turned the blame on me. "You've been neglecting me," she said coldly, her arms crossed as if she were the victim. "You care more about your job than this family." Her words stung, but they didn't distract me from the larger betrayal. As she ranted about how unhappy she was and how she wanted a separation, a nagging thought that had plagued me for years came roaring back. None of our children resembled me. It was something relatives had occasionally joked about, their offhand comments about timelines and features that didn't quite add up brushing against my subconscious. I had always dismissed it, trusting my wife completely. But now, I couldn't ignore it. While she was distracted, I discreetly collected DNA samples from our children. It felt wrong to do so, but the gnawing doubt left me no choice. A few agonizing days later, the results came back. None of the children were mine. Not a single one. Taking action, the betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I had spent over a decade loving and raising children I believed were mine. The realization that my wife had lied to me not just once, but repeatedly shattered me. But there was no time to wallow in despair. I had to act. I filed for divorce immediately. Armed with the DNA results, my lawyer helped me navigate the complicated process of disputing paternity and financial obligations. Predictably, my wife didn't take this well. She hired an aggressive lawyer and attempted to paint me as a neglectful father who was abandoning his children. She even manipulated the kids, telling them I didn't love them and wanted to leave them. It was heartbreaking to see the confusion and hurt in their eyes, but I knew I had to stay strong. To protect myself, I documented every interaction with her. Whenever she tried to bait me into an argument or made false accusations, I stayed composed, ensuring there was a record of her behavior. At one point, she even threatened to call the police, claiming she felt unsafe. But the truth was on my side. The courtroom battle, the court hearing, was one of the most emotionally draining experiences of my life. As I sat in that sterile room, listening to her lawyer twist the narrative, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness. But when it was my turn to present the evidence, the tide began to turn. The DNA results were irrefutable. Text messages and witness statements further exposed her deceit. The judge ruled in my favor. I was relieved of child support obligations and granted a clean break from the legal responsibilities she had tried to impose on me. Though I loved the children I had raised, I couldn't ignore the years of lies that had brought us to this point. The aftermath walking out of that courtroom, I felt a strange mix of liberation and sorrow. My life as I knew it was over, but I had a chance to start anew free from deceit and manipulation. The road to recovery hasn't been easy. Some days, the weight of the betrayal feels unbearable. I think about the children, who are as much victims in this as I am. Despite everything, I still care for them deeply and hope they find peace in their own time. This experience has taught me the importance of seeking the truth, no matter how painful it may be. It's easy to ignore red flags when you're deeply invested in someone, but trust should never be blind. I've also learned to lean on the people who truly care about me. My parents, friends, and colleagues have been a source of unwavering support, reminding me that I'm not alone in this. Rebuilding my life now, I'm focused on rediscovering who I am beyond the lies and betrayal. I've thrown myself into work, finding satisfaction in the career I've built. I've also started therapy, which has been instrumental in helping me process my emotions and rebuild my confidence. One day, I hope to find love again. But for now, I'm taking things one step at a time, prioritizing my well-being and learning to trust myself again. This chapter of my life may have been defined by heartbreak, but the next one will be about resilience and growth. Though the scars of this experience will always remain, I'm determined to move forward stronger, wiser, and more aware of my own worth. She once sent me a furious text, declaring she never wanted me as a father in the first place. It was a cutting message, one that revealed her true colors. At first, I was too hurt to respond. But as the dust settled, I realized I could use her words against her. During the court proceedings, when the judge reviewed that message, it was as if the veil had been lifted from the charade she had been maintaining. The text clearly revealed the extent of her deception and disdain, and the judge wasn't impressed by her arguments, especially when she couldn't even identify the children's biological father. She stammered and tried to deflect, claiming it wasn't his business, a response that only cemented her lack of credibility. At the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in my favor, granting me temporary rights to stay in the house and allowing me to request no financial responsibility for the children once the divorce was finalized. The judge emphasized the importance of the children's emotional well-being, stating that if I chose to maintain a relationship with them, that would be my decision, but legally, it might not fall on my shoulders. It was a bittersweet victory. On one hand, I felt vindicated, but on the other, the reality of the situation was heartbreaking. I truly loved those kids. For over a decade, they had been my world. Regardless of biology, I had seen their first steps, heard their first words, and comforted them during their fears and tears. But every time I looked at them now, I was reminded of her betrayal, her lies, and the blatant disregard she had for my feelings. Worst of all, she had used the kids as leverage in her twisted power games. She played the role of the loving mother, but in truth, she saw them as pawns. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find her lover in our house. He was sitting on the couch, laughing as if he belonged there, while the kids played upstairs. She was smug, clearly trying to provoke me. That was the final straw. I told her she needed to leave. She refused, sneering that I couldn't kick her out. But she hadn't counted on the fact that my attorney had already filed the paperwork granting me sole occupancy of the house until the divorce was settled. The document, citing her infidelity and the toxic environment she had created for the children, was ironclad. I calmly handed her the court document, complete with the official seal, and said, "You have 1 hour to pack what you can carry." She clung to the doorframe, screaming that she had nowhere to go. Her lover tried to interfere, puffing out his chest and threatening to call the cops. I handed him the court order and said, "Go ahead, I'd love to show this to them." My father, who had been waiting outside on standby, stepped in to help enforce the order. Between the two of us, we ensured she and her lover left that night. Watching them drive away was the most satisfying moment I'd had in weeks. With her gone, I began to execute the plan I had been quietly crafting ever since she threatened to paint me as the villain. My revenge wasn't about stooping to her level, but about ensuring she faced the consequences of her actions. First, I gathered every financial document I could find. Over the years, I had shouldered nearly all the expenses: mortgage, utilities, her car insurance, you name it. She had always come up with excuses, claiming she didn't make enough money or needed her paycheck for personal expenses. I compiled a comprehensive dossier of bank statements, receipts, and credit card bills that highlighted her entitlement and her lack of contribution. Next, I turned my attention to her workplace. This might sound extreme, but I discovered she had lied to her boss, claiming I was an abusive husband to gain extra time off and other privileges. That lie had earned her sympathy and special treatment, which she exploited shamelessly. I sent her employer a polite but detailed letter outlining the timeline of events and providing court documents to back up my claims. I didn't embellish; the facts spoke for themselves. Her boss was appalled, and I later heard from mutual acquaintances that disciplinary action was being considered. She had dug her own grave. Meanwhile, her lover vanished the moment financial trouble began to close in. He wasn't interested in sticking around once it became clear that her life was unraveling. She was left to face the fallout alone, and I didn't feel the slightest bit of pity. As the legal process advanced, my lawyer pushed for an expedited divorce. The only significant property we had to divide was the house, and since I had been solely paying the mortgage, the judge awarded it to me. She fought tooth and nail, refusing to sign off on the transfer, but the evidence was on my side. It was a devastating blow for her, and she knew it. During the final hearing, she made a desperate attempt to request spousal support. Her argument was flimsy, and the judge dismissed her claim outright, citing her adultery, paternity fraud, and the fact that she was employed. She stomped her feet and called the proceedings unfair, but her theatrics couldn't overshadow the overwhelming evidence against her. The divorce was finalized, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom. As for the kids, I had a long and emotional conversation with my family. My mother reminded me that biology isn't everything, and that love defines a parent. My father assured me they would support whatever decision I made. After much soul-searching, I chose to maintain contact with the children. I let my ex-wife know I wouldn't pay child support or communicate with her directly. If the kids wanted to see me, they could reach out through my parents, and I would arrange time with them. The court acknowledged this arrangement, understanding the complexity of the situation. Watching her unravel was bittersweet. There were moments when I mourned the early years of our marriage, when I genuinely believed we were building a life together. But those memories were tainted by her lies. Seeing her leave my house, her facade crumbling, was an indescribable relief. After the dust settled, I began to rebuild. My father and I renovated parts of the house she had neglected, turning it into the home I had always envisioned. My mother helped redecorate, erasing every trace of her influence. The emptiness she left behind was gradually replaced with cautious optimism for the future. Sometimes, I reflect on the night that changed everything. It was the darkest moment of my life, but also the catalyst for breaking free from a toxic situation. The kids will always have a place in my heart, but I'll never let her manipulate me again. She tried threats, lies, and entitlement, using the children as pawns in her twisted games. But in the end, it all crumbled under the weight of truth. Looking back, I have no regrets. The journey was painful, but it led me to a place of clarity and strength. I've learned to value myself, to set boundaries, and to prioritize my well-being. And that more than anything is the ultimate victory.